right. Thank you, everyone, so much for coming. We are the House Hacker Mafia. My name is Tanner. That's Ryan over there in the corner. We host it. We're both real estate agents, investors, and house hackers here in Colorado Springs. Jordan is presenting today. Jordan Malara, however you want to pronounce it. He's an ex-house hacker.
No, I still house hack.
He still house hacks. He's an ex part of the group, I guess you could say it.
Oh, yeah.
He used to be with us, but now he's not, so
Yeah.
we kind of don't like him for it, but he's okay. He's still pretty cool. But Jordan's presenting today. He's going to talk about a recent deal that he just did on a motel out in Durango, which is really cool. I'll let you tell your whole story and everything, but we meet 2 times every single month. For November and December, it'll be a little bit different because we have holidays coming up. So make sure you sign in so that you can be up to date on when that will be happening. But give it up for Jordan.
All right.
In real estate, first impressions can make or break a deal. Whether you're listing a home for sale or marketing an investment property, having high quality photos are key at grabbing attention. If you want to stand out in the competitive Colorado Springs market, having high quality photos is essential. And Wayne over at Homadi excels at getting the best possible photos for your property. He's based right here in Colorado Springs and specializes in capturing properties in the best light. If you're ready to take your property photos to the next level, make sure to contact Wayne over at Homadi and mention you heard about him from Tanner at Red & Joy Real Estate to get 20% off your next shoot. Remember, great photos can make the difference between a quick sale and a stale listing. So make sure to contact Wayne over at Homadi today.
What's up, everyone? Yeah, it's good to be back. I used to, for those of you who might recognize my face, I used to help host this thing, and then I kind of transitioned a little bit in terms of what I do day to day. But today, I'll just give like a brief run through of kind of what my story has looked like in real estate, and then jump into kind of my transition into boutique hotels, motels, and then a recent deal that a partner and I have closed and are currently working on. I guess like just to understand the room, I guess like show of hands, who owns like single family assets? Okay, who would you say like long-term rentals, short-term rentals, long-term rentals? Okay, both short-term rentals. Okay, what about like commercial assets? Okay, I could target you. I don't know if there's anybody else that owns. What's the classification that you would co-living? Yeah, anybody else do that stuff? Okay. Oh, yeah, decent amount. All right. Did I miss anything? Any other classifications you guys would put yourself in? All right.
I think I'm a great guy all
around. Thank you, Jeremy. Okay, cool. Yeah, I just want to kind of see what the background of everyone was. I started in single family. It's been I really started with long-term rentals, and I bought a single family first, using the VA loan. Jumped into a duplex where I started a house hack. That was also with the VA loan. And then I started just trying to figure out ways to add value, and just kind of trying to compete in a competitive market. Met some people that did short-term rentals. I'm like, well, I guess I should give this a try. That's really where I dug in over the past like 3 to 4 years. Really just tried to find, I did a lot of garage conversions. I love houses and cottages. And so, I've got 3 of those, and really just love the idea of being able to have these independent units, charge higher rents on them, or get, more higher ADR from a short-term rental perspective because they're separated, and then just being able to like add the value through assets like that. And so that was a primary focus of mine. I still house hack. So the current house that we're in, we bought it and we split off the upper and lower units into separate units because they already had external entrances. We lived in the middle unit, and then we have a cottage in the back. We just had our first kid though, so we didn't want to house hack that intensely anymore. So we closed out a couple of the units and we just rent out the cottage, but still house hacking. It's still fun. Still don't pay a mortgage, so it's really hard to want to do anything else. But I've got a 2-month-old at home. I've been married for 7 or 8 years, 7.5, and then 11 units. Just bought a 27-unit motel, and then I'm a real estate agent, and then I work in this building day to day as operations director for Red & Joy. And so if you guys don't know Red & Joy, we manage about 150 units in the Springs. Maybe a little bit more, and then we're out in Buena Vista, Woodland Park area, but all short-term rentals. So honestly, a lot of this stuff has given me the experience for really what I jumped into. And so I'll talk a little bit about why I think boutique hotels or hotels in general in the hospitality industry is an interesting asset to look to own. I know it's not for everybody, and I don't think it should be for everybody either, not from a competition standpoint, but just because it requires you to put up a lot of stuff that a lot of people don't want to put up with. But a lot of this experience has really shaped me into the kind of investor I've become and really what I've found to be an interesting asset class. Any questions on my life journey so far?
You mentioned Vietnam. Were you in the military?
Yeah, I was in the military for 5 years with that guy behind you and a couple other people. But yeah, I served in the Air Force and in the Space Force. That's how I got out here. So I worked out at Schriever in the 2nd Space Operations Squadron for a bit. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some different reasons as to why boutique hotels are a strategic asset to own, especially in comparison to short-term rentals. A lot of people see them as the same thing, but I think there's a couple of strategic advantages that they provide or benefits that they provide, and so I'll just dig into a couple of those real quick just to kind of give like a high-level overview of why is this asset class even something worth considering. So regulations. As you guys probably know, there's a whole permit system here in Colorado Springs. This is not uncommon for most cities and towns. And so the reason that permit process kind of exists is because you're taking a residential asset in a neighborhood and you're trying to use it for what is traditionally deemed as a commercial use. So hotels are a specific zoning, and you can't just take, let's say, an apartment complex and turn it into a hotel. They're built the same or similarly, but the zoning underlying the property is actually different in terms of how the city and the county looks at it. And so actually, buying an asset like a hotel or a motel with this hospitality zoning allows you to not have to worry about any other regulations. And in fact, it's a general, like in the boutique hotel community, it's a generally held principle that the more regulations there are, the greater probably the opportunity is in that market, because that means short-term rentals are really hard to come by. There's less competition. And so you usually can get away because there's that property is already zoned for a short-term or for a motel or a hotel. So it tends to be a good asset class to invest in a highly regulated market. I would say you're going to deal with higher competition. Let's say like Phoenix, for example. Someone asked me, we took a trip down to Phoenix. Someone asked me, would you ever buy a hotel down here? I said no, probably not, because there's like no regulations in the area, and so that means I'm going to have to deal with every other amazing short-term rental in the area. Really not worth it to me. Yes, they provide a different quality of service and they appeal to a different crowd, but I still don't want to compete with it. And so regulations are a big thing, and just the zoning underlying the actual asset does provide a strategic advantage. Valuation, and so this valuation is the property is going to be valued more off of a commercial approach rather than a residential approach. So for a short-term rental or any other small multifamily property, this is valued off of sales comps most traditionally. And so, if you have a 2-unit or a 1-unit property, all the way up to a 4-unit, they might just compare to previously sold properties. And so really, like, you can be capped at what that value is worth or what that property is worth based off of just the existing sales in the area, similar to just a residential transaction. But the valuation of hospitality is really more of a commercial approach. They're going to look at basically the value that it is brought in by the cap rate and any other revenue. And so that means, and we can kind of dig into more of the numbers, but if I increase NOI by 50 grand, my value could shoot up by 250 grand. And that's just through, say I was able to cut an employee. I now no longer pay a general manager because I went keyless at this resort, and I don't need to pay a front desk staff. That even can cut NOI. So you have so many other levers to pull. And so you could cut expenses, you can increase revenue, you can build additional units or add additional rooms. Anything that's going to push value up or bring expenses down ultimately lead to usually a greater valuation than you would get out of that alone. So like I said, if you had a 50 grand swing and you had a cap rate of 10, you could see a valuation of 250 or whatever those numbers would be. That makes sense? Okay, cool. Okay, so financing options are really interesting too. I know a lot of people are probably familiar with all the creative financing that's kind of surrounding the real estate industry right now. This is not necessarily unique to this time and place and the market right now. just that's really a commercial approach to a residential property, is when you see all these creative financing. But commercial is in general always more of a creative approach. You have basically a stack of debt in which you can basically play around with different ways to kind of finance a specific property. So you have, like, usually people start with some sort of bank financing or private financing, or I shouldn't say private, but yeah, some sort of more traditional commercial conventional financing. But you don't have to start there with these properties. You then can have any sort of creative financing that you might have. So this would be, your seller financing. So your seller's holding a portion or all of the note. Then you can have investors. So a syndication, a fund. You're bringing in other investors, other money that you raise to then put into. You might pay out in a preferred, or like a preferred return, or you might just do some sort of equity split. This could be like a general partner and a limited partner split. These are like pretty traditional financing methods for commercial properties. So we can kind of dig into maybe what the differences are here and what I did. So for our property, well, I'll dig into our property a little bit later, but some of the common ways that people start out with this is either full seller financing. So you find a property.
If you're planning to get photos done on your next listing or rental property, don't forget to reach out to Wayne with Homati to get 20% off your next shoot.
And the seller is a little bit older. They just want to get rid of the asset. They might be willing to seller finance a portion or all of the note. And this can happen. There's properties all over the place that sellers are more than willing to carry almost the entire note, and maybe you bring 10% down. You can also use an SBA loan, which SBA loans are really broad in terms of like what you can use these loans for. You can use them to buy a property. You can use them to buy a business, really anything. This is personally what we did. We went with an SBA loan as kind of the senior debt on the property that took first loan position. These SBA loans are really low down payments. They don't really require a whole lot. In fact, you could get an SBA loan with 0% down with other creative financing strategies. And you can also finance almost all the renovations. The biggest thing is for different asset classes, like for hospitality, the SBA loan will only loan up to 82%, no more than that. So that means you have to come up with a way to raise the other 18%. You can get private debt, you can get bridge loans, you can get basically like any type of loan you want to get. There's even cases, and it's fairly common to just do a full raise. So just start a syndication for a property. You do the whole raise for whatever the actual price of the property is going to be, any renovations. So you really have a ton of flexibility in terms of how you want to finance these properties. And that's where some of the experience kind of comes in. If you understand the different types of debt you can use, then you really understand what your different financing methods are. But you can also bring people in that can help you with that as well. The other thing I'll mention on this is that in the hospitality industry, as is true with a lot of other industries right now, baby boomers are a large stakeholder. They own a lot of these properties. So that opens up an opportunity. If a baby boomer owns it, they likely own the asset outright or have very little debt. Maybe they refinanced, but they usually have very little debt on the property. This opens up the opportunity for seller financing, which is why it's a good asset class at the current moment. Will that exist all the time? No, at some point they'll all get bought up or it'll be harder to find them. But right now, in general, it's pretty easy to find these properties that are not run well. Baby boomers have owned them for a long time. They might even still be living in the owner's suite at these properties. And you can literally just call the front desk and you can say, hey, can I speak to the owner? And a lot of times they're like, yeah, it's me. And then you can try to work out a deal from there. So it's funny, but it happens all the time. And so you have a lot of different options in terms of what your capital stack is going to look like. That was a very brief run through of kind of the capital stack of commercial financing. Any questions on that?
So, like in residential space, like if you're getting a conventional loan that was covering like 75%, so like that's the start of your financing stack. Usually they're not going to let you bring another lender to cover the extra 25% or so. So on the commercial side, is it just SBA that allows you to bring lenders on top of them, or like do most lenders allow you to build this whole financing stack to be 100% levered?
a lot of times they will allow you to bring others. So like if it was a bridge lender, they would allow you to bring in other partners. It's really dependent on how you structure the actual entity. So even the SBA will care if all of a sudden you're giving away a ton of equity. So you have to be really careful with how you bring that money in. Like for our first deal, we brought in a limited partner, like a silent partner that came in just below 20%. And by not breaking that 20%, that really allowed us to be able to kind of get it through. Oddly enough, they don't care about seller financing. So like again, I'll explain kind of the story on the first deal, but we basically like needed to raise another 200K, and we're like, what are we going to do? And the lender's like, oh, we don't care about the seller financing. They can hold that note. And so they don't care about any of that. And most lenders won't. Most bridge lenders won't. Most other commercial financing lenders won't. At the end of the day, a lot of this financing is it's not very regulated. It's people that raised money to then invest in projects at high returns. And so they're going to underwrite the deal. And so really what you want to show is I'm an experienced operator in whatever asset class this is. And this is kind of the structure for like the deal, this is how good the deal is. This is how the ownership structure of the specific syndication or the fund is laid out. So I would say there's tons of flexibility on it. It's just going to kind of depend on the specific situation. And honestly, that's one of the reasons that I'm not a huge proponent of attorneys. I don't know if anybody's an attorney in here. Sorry to offend you, but there's a lot of stuff that like we pay attorneys for that we don't really need to. In fact, I think on our first deal, I paid an attorney and it was absolutely useless. They just like read through some docs. Whatever, it's a learning experience. But when you start getting into like raising capital, that's where those guys come in clutch. Like there's a million different ways to structure a syndication, and there's a million different ways in which that structure might affect the financing on the property. And so having those people work hand in hand, review, hey, this is what the lender's going to send over, and having those guys say, okay, this is probably how we need to structure this based off of their knowledge of whatever loan product you're using, I think is really what helps. Yeah. Other questions?
I'm curious what percentage I'm not comfortable to share, right?
I'll share everything.
Maybe like walk me through the process of how you decided how much equity you use for equity, and then how much debt. Like how do you know the right amount of debt and the right amount of equity?
Yeah. Let me jump. I'll further explain that in the deal, and then I'll try to dig into that even more. Yeah. Let's see. Okay. Funny enough, I don't think I added did I add pictures? Oh, later. Okay. Well, whatever. Well, I'll hop to those so you guys can look at those. So this is the property we purchased. It's we basically, a business partner and I came together and we said, we've got all this experience in short-term rentals. Let's find a way to buy a hotel, because what I realized working here is that management of 150 units across all of Colorado Springs is actually really difficult. But the more units you have together really simplifies things. So now instead of sending housekeepers all over the place, they can go in a room, clean a room real quick, get out, move on to the next one. Operations are super simple, and revenue is about the same. And so we really saw a strategic advantage to being able to hop into this industry, apply some of the new principles that short-term rentals are kind of bringing into the industry, as well as there's a lot of boutique hotels that do this stuff really, really well. And so just trying to figure out, okay, what do they do really well, and how can we kind of blend the two, take our kind of new age experience and make this something cool. So we found this opportunity. It's way overpriced. I think it was priced at 2.7 when it was on the market. And we're like, these numbers just don't make sense. It's a 25 unit, but we're like, well, I think there's room. Initially we saw an opportunity to add 2 rooms. In this section up here is this lobby area. And then if you go back here, there's a manager's suite, which is all of this, and actually goes down into the basement. And then there's, this is the manager's suite. And then this is the office. And the office was literally just a room without a door, like a hotel room without a door. So we're like, well, this is easy. So we're like, that's a room. And then we're like, we don't need an on-site manager with how we're going to manage things. And so we're like, okay, great. We've found 2 ways to add revenue. So if each room brings in, I think our calculations were, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think it was, if each room generates 50K and the cap rate's 10, we were going to get about 500. No, we were going to get about 250K in value. I can't remember. I think it was like 5X or something like that in terms of the value we were going to get from, Joe, you're a numbers guy. You could probably check me on that. But we were going to get basically way more out of just the simple, just the room addition from what we were seeing. And then we're like, well, these rooms are pretty bland. The owner, basically this place used to be like what was called a Knights Inn. Knights Inn, if you don't know the history of it, used to be one of the worst known flagged hotels in America. This specific hotel was known for these rooms back here. They had doors that went to the outside. I have no idea why. And basically, two drug dealers kind of tagged up. They would rent those rooms, and then they would deal drugs out of the back rooms. So some guy came in about 7 years ago, bought the place, and started remodeling it. And he turned it into something phenomenal. Like the Adventure Inn, the one thing the property had for it was the marketing was phenomenal. The SEO was really good. They were capturing a ton of the market. They had at one point 60 or 70% direct bookings, which is super high in the industry. And they had phenomenal reviews, even right now, our Google reviews. And so we knew we had to keep that, and that was worth a lot more. And so it's hard to put a number to something like that, but we knew there was a lot there, and that we didn't want to lose that, and that there was some opportunity. We ran numbers. We said, we only can afford this place at probably 2.4, 2.45. And they said, okay, we'll consider it. And so we started basically inking this deal. It took from initial showing interest to actually like figuring something out, took about 2 months. So we really were like super persistent. They had buyers come and go, but we were the only people that were really persistent on this. And so we got an SBA loan on it. We thought that was really the best option, and we were going to put about 20% down. And so we were just going to come, me, my business partner, and one other guy, were just going to come in, and we were just going to bring the cash that we had. We were just going to figure it out from there. We knew it needed renovations, and so we were going between two loan products. There's basically two different SBA loan products that you can use, and we ended up going with one that allows us to fund, or basically allowed us to have a second loan that also funded the entire renovations. So for this specific property, we estimated our estimate for renovations was about $400,000. It's now about $500,000. We were a little bit off on our initial calculations, which is another cool thing that I'll talk about in a little bit. But we estimated that we were going to need about $400K in renovations to renovate all the rooms, to renovate the lobby, we put like a hot tub in, do kind of a slight remodel on the outside, and fix up all the rooms. So that's kind of the property. Let me go back a little bit. Purchased for 2.45. The appraisal actually came in at 2.6 as is, and then I think the finished value was something around 3.2. So we were walking into a little bit of equity. We contributed about $300K, and like I said, that was divided equally. My partner and I retained a little bit less than 40%, and then we brought in the third guy that took about a little bit less than 20%, and then we gave him a preferred return at, I think, 7%. And so, Joe, to kind of come back to your question, ultimately, how you determine what is actually worth paying somebody or paying on that debt is just like you would for any other debt. So you stack up all the debt, and you figure out what's my total debt payment, including the preferred return that I have to pay this partner. And then you see how does that affect the overall deal. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Well, I guess part of it is you could put down, you said originally you were going to put down 20%, is that right? And then you ultimately did put down 20%?
So we ended up putting down 10%. Yeah, I guess I didn't explain this. We were going to raise some money, and then we were going back and forth. And then I can't remember how it exactly transpired, but basically at one point we're like, hey, I think we're going to back out of this deal unless the seller can provide about $200K in seller financing. And so he's a local guy. He still lives in the area. He loves this place. But he's also a very relational guy. And that's what we realized over time, just through chatting with him. And ultimately he believed in us. And he's like, no, I view me lending money to you as like an investment into what you guys are going to do into this. And I think like you guys are going to do great. And so he gave us super favorable terms. He gave us the first year off, so we don't pay anything for the first year. So, which is great because we're doing renovations. So any way with it, we cannot, if we can pay less money. So he gave us a year off, and then I think interest starts at like 8%, which we're getting from the SBA. I think about just decreased because it's variable, but it was about 10%. So that's how we ended up just putting 10% down. Does that answer so how did we decide how much to put down was really your question. And ultimately it didn't matter. The deal was good enough. I'll just jump to the next one so you can see it. But ultimately we were like the cash on cash, because we were putting so little down, was 65%. The exit sale price that we're estimating, if we were to exit in 5 to 7 years, was about 7.5. And our annualized cash flow was high enough. So it didn't really matter. Like in some ways, like you look at the deal and you're like, well, he could have asked for a lot more and we would have given him a lot better of terms if he wanted it. Same with our limited partner, but we proposed terms and it worked for them.
But it was so good, then why couldn't you pay more property? Like they were asking, why did you decide to go back?
There's a lot of unknowns. So we made a lot of assumptions at first, and we don't know how to verify those assumptions necessarily. And so we were going off of what we felt comfortable with, based off of like what we knew. And then also our assumptions did change since the initial purchase. So there's a lot of things that we didn't account for. One of the hardest things that we found with the industry is we've only been looking at properties in the short-term rental industry. And when we look at these properties, we have limited data. And what we didn't factor in is that the hotel data, you don't charge a cleaning fee on a hotel data. So what you have to do is you have to compare short-term rentals and the cleaning fee. So you have to compare an ADR, a nightly revenue, and a cleaning fee to your overall per room, your nightly revenue, because hotels don't charge that cleaning fee. You have to basically equate them. You have to remember that someone is going to be willing to pay a certain fixed amount. So the total cost of both stays have to be equal. That makes sense? So if your short-term rental of the nightly rate for the room plus the cleaning fee equals $300, then our hotel room without a cleaning fee can be charged at $300. Does that make sense? So we were looking at numbers for factoring out the cleaning fee. And so we thought I want to say we thought our nightly or our ADR was going to be like $15 less or something like that. And it made a huge difference once we had this realization. There's ways in which you can get this data from hotels. We just were too cheap to pay for it. You can pay for a CoStar basically, and you can get all the data you want. But we were like, we've never done this before. We don't want to spend $500 a month on data. Like, we'll just figure it out. And so some of our assumptions showed basically worse returns until we actually got further into the deal and realized, oh, actually this is looking better and better. So things kind of slowly changed our perspective. There's a couple other things. We were looking at a higher loan interest rate option, and that came down. It's variable, so actually it continues to come down, continues to get better for us. I can't remember what, like, if anything else changed, but yeah. 25 years, I think it is. Yeah, it's still a full loan, but most people refinance out. Don't quote me on that. I don't remember what it is. We're basically, how these properties work, our plan with this is come in, increase operations, fix it up, and once you have 2 to 3 years of stabilized annual income, you can refinance the property. Hospitality is a little bit more strict. You can probably do 1 to 2 years in another asset, but hospitality in general is viewed as a high risk asset class. And so they're really strict on how many years of income they want to see. So almost every assumption we make is that we're not going to be able to refinance for 3 to 4 years. And so once we refinance, we should be able to refinance into a lower fixed rate option because basically our loan to value or our NOI is going to be way healthier. It's going to look way better. But on the onset, when we were trying to finance this thing, we probably called, 40 to 50 banks and could not find anybody that wanted to lend on it. Even at 2.45. And that was another restriction on why we couldn't pay for it. That was actually probably one of the biggest restrictions. No lender wanted to lend more than 1.9 on it. And so basically we went back and forth, and this is why they had such a tough time selling it. They had a good asset, but hospitality is not, it's really hard to find anybody to lend on it right now. And when they do want to lend on it, it's usually at a really low loan to value. So that really affects a lot of things.
You couldn't do 5% for the SBA. Like, I'm wondering if different banks are saying different things, but it's SBA, so it's backed by the government.
The lender we ultimately ended up going with just had it seemed like they had a better understanding of the SBA loan. To be honest, the whole purchase process was an absolute shit show. I mean, it was really bad. Like, the lender forgot what day we were closing, and I mean, it was not easy. Jeremy, you would never forget, would you? But yeah, I kid you not. I called them a week before, and I was like, "Hey, so like we're trying to set up closing," and they're like, "When do you close again?" Wait, what are you talking about? Like, when do we close? They're like, "Oh, we needed to have these documents out yesterday if you wanted to close." I'm like, what? And so we had to delay closing quite a bit. There's a couple other cool things we did with the property too. Is like, even though we weren't going to close until August 1st, we actually took operational control once we had loan approval, which was July 1st. What we realized was that the owner was severely underpricing, and that he like basically was not optimizing revenue. So we didn't want to walk in knowing that lead time was 3 weeks and then have to like wait it out. And so we basically negotiated through the contract that we take operational control and we surrender all earnest money, which was a lot. We surrendered about 100K and put that on the line. But we were so confident in closing. Part of the reason it was a little scary when the lender wanted to delay things, but it gave us the ability to basically push up numbers a lot better. And basically, with doing no renovations, each month we do about 20K better than we had projected and what the previous owner was doing. So it's pretty cool to see how we're already seeing the results of that, even without the renovations. And so we're pretty bullish on how it's going to go.
Would that be different operationally than what he was doing to future residents?
These baby boomer owners, they say this is what the price is per night, and this is how much this property is worth, and I don't want to charge more than this, and we don't go below this. So basically, they set prices that are arbitrary. He had no reason to really set those prices. He just said, we don't exceed $200. Actually, we don't go above $195, and we don't go below whatever amount it was. So basically, dynamic pricing is the first thing that we implemented. We put a new website in, and we put a new property management software in. And between those three things, really, that made a pretty large difference. And then we just started marketing campaigns. Google Travel is like a phenomenal source of business, and so we got on Google Travel, all those things.
I have two quick questions. So you mentioned that the owner before you bought it like a couple of years before, and then they like renovated the place. I'm wondering like why did they sell it like so fast? Because you're holding it for quite a while, like 5, 7, 10 years. And then also when you took it over for that month from July to like August, and you guys were changing some of the things operationally to like get a little more revenue, did the owner see that and I guess have a little bit of a reaction with that?
Yeah, so the first question about so the seller owned it for 7 years, I think it was. So he owned it for like a decent amount of time. It was really kind of like, I feel like he hit a midlife crisis when he went to purchase it. Like, he had no hospitality experience, and he had similar problems trying to get anybody to finance this thing because, again, it was like the worst, sketchiest place in town. But he convinced this one lender to actually lend for him on it, and he lived in the manager's suite with his wife, and they just slowly fixed it up. I mean, it was like a passion project for him. But ultimately, what happened is he's an interesting guy. He wanted to start another business. He wanted to start a communications, like internet and communications business in Durango, where they were kind of like laying fiber across the mountains. And so it was basically taking too much of his attention, and so he didn't want to focus on it anymore. And then as far as, what was the second one?
Just basically like when you guys changed it for that month that you took it over before closing.
Oh, did he notice? Probably. I mean, he probably kept an eye on it. He's a pretty nosy guy. So I have no doubt. And I have no doubt that he probably stops by every once in a while. He's great, though. I mean, at the end of the day, he's a great guy. He had his personal opinions on certain things. One of his claims was that, let's see if I have a picture of it. This front desk, he had someone come into the motel one day. He got it from a garage sale for $500. He had someone that was all enamored because they said this was a rare antiquity and it was worth about 60K. And so he was so proud of this thing. So like, what we're going to do is we're going to offer it to him. I don't want to throw away this thing, but it's the ugliest thing in the world. So I'm not going to keep it. But yeah, we keep good relations with him. I don't know what he thinks, but I think he's excited to see it get better. I think he knows that over the past few years, like, he didn't do a full renovation. He wants to see it kind of succeed. And so, he gives us the liberty to do whatever. And I don't know, I think he'll be happy at the end of the day.
So, you kind of talked about the bank's hesitancy.
Like, what percentage of that was the valuation? What percentage of that was the fact that it was hospitality? Like, as you were calling banks, it's a little bit of both. Basically, what those some banks. So that traditionally the best finance you can get is just call a bunch of credit unions. Durango's a super small town. We called every credit union. There's probably only 5 of them, maybe 8. Even the one that was currently holding the note, and they said no, we don't do it. And there was only one bank that said yes, we will lend on hospitality at this time. And so ultimately, like, it's just too risky of an asset, and they don't want to hold a certain amount. So if say they have a certain percentage of hospitality, they're probably going to try to steer away from it at that point. So that's their biggest thing. It also has to. Durango presumably has lots of hospitality. Yeah, it's very tourist driven. And then they also have a certain loan to value. So what they do is they're going to look at the books of what the current business is operating at. Because remember, if we don't perform and we stop paying them, they have to foreclose and they have to figure out how to run this thing. And so they have to know, okay, what are the numbers right now, what it's performing at, and then what is the valuation? And so then they come up with a value based off of that, or like a total amount they'll lend on. The problem is that a lot of these properties that specifically we're looking at purchasing, they're run down. They're not managed well. And so if they look at the current valuation, they're going to say, we're not going to lend anything on this. And so that's the biggest issue. The SBA is the only loan program that I've found, and I'm told that it's still the only loan program out there that will lend based off of projections. So that is really why it's such a great loan product, especially when starting out. In the future, you find other loan programs, you talk to other people, you raise more capital. But when you're starting out, if you can just go with a traditional loan that's very low money down, it ends up being probably the best option. Did they vet your short-term rental experience quite a bit? Yeah, they did. Well, you're providing a personal guarantee. So one, me and my partner had to show that we have. I'm wondering, if you weren't you, would they have lent? Like, how much was your experience? That's a fair question. I think what they care about more is collateralized debt, and so I think they're going to ask for a personal guarantee, and our personal debt had to add up to 1.9 million. That would be my assumption. But I think the experience does matter, and the experience matters even more when you're talking to someone that's just going to seller finance the whole thing, or for other people. Like, if I'm trying to raise funds and I say I want to buy a hotel, and I'm going to promise this much interest, but I have no experience with any of this, it's going to be a lot harder to raise money. I was listening to a podcast where Tony Robinson, the host of the BP Rookie podcast, was saying that he just bought his first boutique, 13 unit out in like Utah. But he was saying he was trying to do a large raise, and he fell short of his raise, and he had to back out of the deal. So it's not necessarily the easiest thing, even for someone like that, to raise money.
You said that the SBA loan takes into account projections.
Mm-hmm.
That's for renovations in this city. So if income after the renovations, is there any stipulation on when you have to, perform those renovations, or how fast, or is there any bad fire?
Well, it depends. So you can do projections just off of the purchase, and even if you're not doing renovations, you can say, hey, just through operational efficiency, just through increased marketing, whatever it may be, we think we can boost the revenue of this place, and that could be off the projection you provide. The renovation loan is actually a second loan. So, for example, we haven't closed on the renovation loan. We wanted to get this thing closed and take ownership as quickly as possible because we were up against a summer season. And so basically, if we were to delay, it was going to cost us a ton of money. For example, in August, I think we brought in $100,000. So if we didn't close in August and we instead closed in September, we didn't keep any of that money. So that was a huge loss for us. And so it was really important for us to close as quickly as possible. We couldn't close the renovation loan because we didn't have permits yet, and they require permits. We actually just got permits today, which is awesome. Super pumped about it. Which is right on time. We were planning to start renovations middle of November. That never happens. So I'm just stoked that it happened. But we will close probably in the next week on the renovations. Again, we're showing how those renovations now can lead to higher projections. So you can do it without the renovation portion and still get it based off of projections.
So if your projections change higher.
Yeah, actually, our renovations came in. Like I said, we thought it was going to be $400K. We ended up being about $100K off. And so we went to our lender. I don't even know why we asked, but we're like, hey, could you by chance go up another 100K? And I'm like, well, we'll have to talk to this person, this person, this person. And then they got back to us last week and they're like, yeah, we'll go an extra 100K. I'm like, I don't know what kind of voodoo you're doing back there. Like, I don't really understand. Like, you told us originally the most you could do was 400K, and all of a sudden now you can magically do 500K. And by the way, we didn't revise expectations for them. So we didn't really revise projections, even though our projections are better now, but they were still able to like lend. There's some sketchy lenders out there. I'll just say that.
Can you go back to the breakdown of your of all the costs?
Yeah.
No, go to the other one.
Oh.
Okay, so super curious. I'm super curious how you got into this. I'm trying to make the math. So SBA loan 1.9, 200K seller financing, which is 2.1. You guys put 300K in, right?
We did put 300K. Yeah.
So now you're at 2.4. You bought it for 2.45, and you need another 400K renovation. So where was the extra 100K? And so is the SBA just giving you another 400, 500K for the renovation?
The SBA loans 82% of renovation costs.
Okay.
So we only had to come up with 18% of the renovation costs.
Okay.
So of that, same, we haven't paid that yet, but we will at closing.
You haven't closed on the renovation loan yet?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
And the other thing to keep in mind too, that's not explained here, the SBA has, they have kind of tiered fees. The tiered fees get roped into the loan, which is nice. But for example, I think on the initial purchase price or the initial closing, which was the loan was at 1.9 million, I think we paid 30K, maybe it was 15, some lower amount in like fees, SBA loan fees. Once you break that 2 million, you incur a lot higher of fees. We went back and forth on if it was worth it because I think our fees went up we had to pay another 60K at closing. Well, in fees that gets wrapped into the loan. And so now you're weighing like, well, do I just raise those funds because now I got to pay an extra 60K? Like that's a decent portion of a 500K loan because we broke that $2 million mark. But at the end of the day, it was just a lot easier and simpler for us to just get the loans from the SBA. But does that kind of answer your question?
I think so, yeah. Where are you coming up with the down payment? How does that affect your GP?
Down payment was, we all just brought 100K cash.
I mean for the renovation loan.
Closes, how's that? We're just going to split that 3 ways, the same way we have with everything else. Yeah.
Cool. Wait, the third partner only brought 100K? Even though they got less?
You got to value your management experience and we're putting the deal together. He's sat back and done nothing. I mean, it's been a pretty decent deal for him. Yeah. Other questions? So yeah, it's been fun. We are, let's see. Yeah, we're about to kick off renovations. We're gonna do basically split how we do renovations. We're gonna do 5 rooms at a time. We did a full redesign, so we hired a designer. We have all design stuff back. We're going through branding right now, so we're gonna keep the Adventure Inn name and just completely rebrand it. It's really fitting, actually. We were looking for kind of an adventure-themed, kind of like, I shouldn't say adventure-themed, but outdoor-themed. Durango's huge for fishing, mountain biking. There's a ski resort up the road. There's a hot spring. Like, there's tons of outdoor stuff. So we were kind of gearing towards that anyways. We were looking really all over the U.S., anywhere from like Florida to Arkansas to Lake Tahoe, trying to find like an asset that kind of fit us and like what we enjoy. And so we really wanted it to be kind of outdoor themed. So the name actually fits. So we're just going to kind of revamp that and yeah, start on renovations. We should be done by, fingers crossed, February, end of February, launch for kind of spring break, and yeah, kick it from there and see how it goes. So it's gonna be fun. We're currently in talks for a second deal. I've prepared an offer today, so we'll probably start. We got another offer for a 38 unit that we're looking at purchasing too, and so probably just try to keep it rolling. And
So you're looking in Lake Tahoe?
we were looking in Lake Tahoe. Yeah, we had an offer that we were almost under contract for there before this one, and it just, the numbers, I mean, there's a lot of competition out there too. That was the unique thing about Durango and about some of these markets we're looking at. The boutique hotel market is not great. And like, that means we can come in and just be like the top dog. Or if there are properties being renovated, like right next door to the Adventure Inn, they just did $1 million renovation. I walked it and I did not think it was that great. I think ours is going to be a lot better. Just like the quality, and I guess even like the branding that they did, I didn't think they did a phenomenal job. So I think like there's opportunity there. Lake Tahoe, super saturated with some phenomenal places, and so we were in South Lake Tahoe that we were looking on the California side. Yeah, most of the better assets are actually on the Reno side or Nevada side or whatever it is, but yeah, it's a tough market. I think there's still opportunity there, but the deal that we were specifically looking at, we couldn't get the seller to move. I mean, he did not want to come down from his price. I think it was priced very similarly, like 2.6, and I mean that thing, it wasn't as great as this one. The numbers didn't look as good. So. Do you like that market or?
There's a lot of industrial failing housing.
Oh, interesting.
The Air Force Base not that far from there. There's other cities near there that are near Lake Tahoe.
Okay, cool. I like California. Tons of regulations in California. Oh, really? And that's funny coming from a short-term rental perspective and like a long-term rental perspective. I would never own those assets in California. I think they're like, with all the landlord-tenant laws and everything, I think it's like a really terrible place. But in terms of regulations, they got it down pat. And so like owning a hospitality property, I think in there would actually come with some benefits. Yeah.
How, when you were scoping out the renovations, first of all, what year was it built in? Yeah.
So this portion of the building is all old. This was built in they actually don't have dates on a lot of it, but they think it was built in the 60s. This building actually came over all the way. When they were building, I can't remember the full story. It's like when they were building nukes, a lot of the radiation was actually dumped underneath here. So at one point, the city of Durango said, you got to get all that out of there. So they tore down this part of the building and they dug all of it out. I don't know if you can do that, but they said they dug all of it out and then they rebuilt this. This was in like the 70s or 80s. So this part is new. It's 2-story, as you can see. And then this side is all old. Yeah. You don't ask any questions. You walk quickly, swiftly, and you get out of there.
So I'm wondering how you, like I would feel uncomfortable and then there's one renovation, find something about knocking out the walls and without like scoping it
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, what worked well for you guys, and what do you think is the risk that you just kind of have to take and like find out as you go?
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think a lot of our experience tells us that you're never really going to know. What we knew is that we weren't going to do like a full gut. It was just going to be too pricey. But what we were confident in was the previous owner. Through talks and conversations with him, we realized like he cared about this thing a lot. He did a lot of stuff. Like he was the one that reran all of the electrical. He was and you might think that sounds sketchy, but he's a smart guy. And he had a lot of like stuff to check through his work and make sure it was done properly. He was really against doing like, he was famous for retelling stories and even more famous for retelling the same story over and over again, which was that there was like this cinder block fireplace in here and he didn't want the city to know that he was doing something unpermitted. And so he did it like late at night one night and like without the city knowing. And basically he was like, he wanted to make sure things were done correctly. And you could see that throughout it all. Like he wasn't like the best at laying tile. Like if you lay tile, you know that's not a great way to lay tile. But when it came to the things that mattered, he put the highest like quality roof on that's not only fire resistant, but it was also, supposed to be like more like hail resistant and stuff. So he cared about that stuff. He reran all the electrical. He reran a lot of like the water and piping. Again, this place was in shambles, and it was a passion project for him to really like bring it up. And so we weren't overall overly concerned with like this property. Now this next deal we're looking at, I do not trust this thing at all. It was built in the 90s, and it looks like when we heard it was built in the 90s, I thought it was built in like 70s, like or 60s. It looks really bad. We are just accounting for far more renovations. That's like a $1.2 million renovation.
Where's that
Can't say yet.
location?
I said I can't.
Oh, you can't say.
Yeah, it's in Colorado. Yeah. So I think if you aren't confident in what you think the renovation scope is going to be, estimate higher. And there's also tons of, you factor in as much as you can into the renovations. We should have probably factored in more. We paid a lot out of pocket, such as like branding. There's a cost to actually getting quality branding. We tried to do it cheap on Upwork. It didn't work out. There's a cost to hiring a designer, especially if you want to fly them out. And so we're going to fly our designer out a couple times. Marketing is more expensive in a town. And then we knew Durango was going to be more expensive too. What's interesting though is that usually a lot of renovations happen in the summertime. And so we promised this guy, hey, we got a lot of winter work for you. And he's like pumped. He like basically stopped taking all projects, and now he's just doing ours. And so I don't know, there's a lot of stuff to factor in, but.
Sick. I'm going to call it there. If you
Okay.
got more questions, Jordan will stick around for a little bit.
Yeah.
Sweet. Give it up for Jordan. Thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah.
That was great. Excited to see how it goes. I wanted to leave some time for networking. We got 30 minutes, so meet somebody new. We're going to have one meetup in December, so no meetup for over Thanksgiving. We'll then meet on the second Thursday of December, and then the 4th is around Christmas, so we're going to take that off, and then we'll be back in the new year. So.